like to give a special thanks to Magic X Beats, produced this track, Proclaim Your Nationality. I never would have thought it would be this way, to proclaim my nationality. I got a birthright inheritance, Europeans don't want you to have an actuality. I never would have thought it would be this way, to proclaim my nationality. I got a birthright inheritance.
Thank you for tuning into WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. You are listening to What is Your Nationality? And I'm your host, Shem L. I'm the author of several books, including Land of the Free, which you can purchase on my website, shemel.com. That's SHEM-EL.com. And on that website, you also have the opportunity to join in on the 6-month mentorship known as Trauma to Triumph Training, where we deal with issues such as generational trauma, racial trauma, and post-traumatic slave syndrome, and tackling all these things so we can get back to the state of the glorious people who we are, get back to the mindset of a people who are just the glorious ways of who we are as a people, and just getting back to that state of contribution and respect and nobility and dignity. So with that said, also, I want to update everybody. We are still on for the first social and economic conference of Durham, North Carolina. You are all invited. It will take place in January of 2022, the end of January. We still have a tentative date and location, but we do have 2 confirmed speakers that will definitely be presenting at that particular event. So we have more to come, and we will keep you posted. So as far as the topic of our show, this will be part 2 of our previous discussion. So this is Who Understands the African American Part 2. Who understands the African American Part 2? So I wanted to continue on with dissecting the particular article that was written by Jason D. Hill. Jason D. Hill is a Jamaican American professor he's a professor of philosophy at DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois. And so he wrote an article, and that article was entitled, What Do African Americans Owe America? And he is also the author of a book entitled, What Do White Americans Owe Black People? And the subtitle to that is Racial Justice in the Age of Post-Oppression. So for those of you who had the opportunity to listen to our previous show, you'll know that I went pretty deep into this article, which is a very long article, but I had to dissect it, and we're going to continue to dissect it. He says some, in my humble opinion, some outlandish things. It really makes you wonder about this guy. And for those who had the opportunity to listen to the show, I hope you had the opportunity to, after the show, to research this guy, Jason D. Hill, who he is and everything. Now, I want to put a disclaimer out, so to speak. I know towards the end of the show, I made a statement that Jason D. Hill seems to be a new line of people who happen to be immigrants who identify as Black in America, who have been taking shots at the people identified as African American. So with that said, I want to make it clear that in no way, shape, or form am I saying that all people of the Caribbean, of Nigerian descent, and other places in Africa, people of other places of the African diaspora, hold this same mindset or hold this same sentiment. In no way or shape, form am I saying that. I know that to not be the case, because I personally know a lot of people throughout the African diaspora, and they don't hold it. Now, there are those who do, but there are quite a number of those who do not share the same thoughts and sentiments of people like Jason D. Hill. But I notice that it is the Jason D. Hills of the world who have access to the media. They have access. They're getting the airtime, if you will, and they're pushing this narrative. They're being supported. Through mainstream. Keep in mind, this article came out on The Hill, which is a major political publication. So if you have people like him pushing this out, then it goes without saying that there's something going on. But what we're going to do is we're going to dive into that. But first, we're going to take a brief pause for the cause. And once we're done, when we come back, we will continue our discussion. You're listening to What is Your Nationality? And I'm your host, Shem L. You're tuned into WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. We'll be right back after the break.
Check it out. Hi everyone. Be sure to connect with us on Facebook at WDRB Media and follow us on Instagram at WDRB Media Radio
for all your updates, information, and inspiration.
You're listening to WDRB Media, the voice of the community.
Welcome back to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, and those streaming live through free TuneIn radio app and through iHeartRadio. You are listening to What is Your Nationality? And I'm your host, Shem L. I'm the author of several books, including What is the Higher Self, which you can purchase on my website, shemel.com. That's SHEM-EL.com. Also, on my website, you get the opportunity to participate and join our 6-month mentorship program, which is called Trauma to Triumph Training, where we address the issues of generational trauma, racial trauma, as well as post-traumatic slave syndrome, to conquer those issues and get back to the state of the great people who we are. Also, another reminder, we will have our social and economic conference, first social economic conference in Durham, North Carolina, January of 2022, towards the end of January 2022, and you are all invited. We will keep you posted as details develop. So if you're just tuning in, we were discussing the topic with the title of Who Understands the African American Part 2. This is part 2 to a previous episode entitled Who Understands the African American, where we were dissecting the article written by Jason D. Hill. Jason D. Hill is a Jamaican American professor and author. He's a professor of philosophy in DePaul University in Chicago. So I'm going to go ahead and get back to this article. And before I continue where I left off, I want to recap on the last section of the article that I read from in the previous episode. So I'm just going to do that so people can kind of give a concept of how crazy this article is, how crazy this guy's thinking is. This is what he wrote. This is the excerpt. He says, the African indigene was a natural creature who had not yet transformed himself out of biological time into an epoch-making world historical person. Having failed to abstract himself from nature by transcending it, the sub-original indigene viewed himself as inextricably bound to nature. To enter the historical process, one must see oneself as transcendent of nature. Nature becomes a thing, not that one adapts oneself to as do animals, but rather as a malleable entity that adapts to human needs, desires, aspirations, and creative capabilities. Only a self that is divorced from nature can enter the historical process. An irrevocable tie to nature condemns one to a life of cyclicality, a range of the moment existence in which innovation, change, moral and political evolution, and creative adaptation are not possible. Tragically, it took slavery, which Africans facilitated with the Europeans, to transplant the indigene into the historical process by inserting him into the civilization's crucibles of Judeo-Christendom with its emancipatory moral narratives and an evolving political philosophy that discovered, recognized, and protected the inalienable rights of man. These include freedom and liberty, the pursuit of happiness, freedom of conscience and speech, the right to bodily integrity, and the right to property. The induction was tragic. It involved a violation of natural right to freedom. Yet it was the precondition for the indigene to comprehend the singular meaning of the true moral freedom. That is a freedom found in being bound to natural law. It is a freedom from existing encasement in living as a pure biological creature, as dictated by the precepts of an animistic worldview. True moral freedom is found in being bound by moral law. We have the capacity to follow the laws of reason that lead us all to adhere to invariable laws of nature. So, make it real quick and short. He said basically that you, Negro, was nothing more than a creature. You was a savage in the jungle, because that's basically is basically what Europeans were saying. White supremacists have been saying you were savage in the jungle, and we had to take you. We had to enslave you for you to even understand what it's like to be civilized. So basically, the Europeans civilized the savages. If it wasn't for you, you'd still be ooga booga, spear chucking, bones in your nose, and all that. All the racial stereotypes is depicted by this statement. Is just a sophisticated language in saying it, overlooking the fact that the Moors, who were inhabitants in Africa, went to Europe and civilized the Europeans. The Europeans in Europe, particularly in Spain, Italy, and those parts, they wasn't bathing. They didn't have street lights, none of that. It was the Moors. And let me be clear. When I'm saying Moors, I'm not saying any amalgamated light Arabs. I'm not saying that. I'm saying dark people with Africoid features did the civilizing. There are records of that. There are old paintings that show that. It is a fact. And people in Europe know that. That's a fact. They know that. Now you, Jason D. Hill, may not know that because that wasn't taught to you. Maybe not. You should know. But that's a fact. The Moors civilized Europe. The people of Africa civilized Europe. That is the fact. And then to say that the civilization resided in Judeo-Christendom, which is false. That's a false narrative. Civilization existed way before the existence of Judeo-Christian, before the existence of Judaism and before the existence of Christianity. And this is no knock to anyone who is a Christian, anyone who practices Judaism. Is just a fact. Ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt is proof of that. Civilization existed way before that. So all of this is a lie, a real fat lie. And it's just white supremacy. It's white supremacy just being fancied up in nice language. And it got being spoken by a person of, as he say, of mixed race. You catch what I'm saying? So he's being used as a tool to spew out this white supremacist rhetoric. So, and he said Africans facilitated slavery with the Europeans, right? That is the one fact that he has right? Like, that is a fact. I do not argue that fact. That being said, so he almost says it as if that justifies it even more. But according to you, the Africans were creatures of nature. So how could the Africans would be capable or have the evolved mind to know to take the indigenous Africans, the African indigene, as you call it, and put them into slavery? You see what I'm saying? How you contradict yourself, but I'll move on from that. So, because that totally negates that argument, because he would have to, for that to be true, he has to acknowledge that there was civilization in Africa prior to slavery, prior to the transatlantic slave trade and colonization. But he's not going to go into that because this guy is programmed. But anyway, I'll continue on with his article. He goes on to say this, quote, "Freed from repetitive cyclical conceptions of life, the descendants of today's sub-Saharan ancestors are endowed with a legal and public personality and recognized as being beyond exclusion from the human condition. This endowment is a historical achievement." Pause. He's saying that it was a great feat of history to kidnap people from Africa and put them in slavery, because now, as a result, the descendants of those slaves, those people who were put in slavery, who were kidnapped, those people are now recognized as basically human, recognized as being beyond exclusion from the human condition. So now you get the right. So now you're not savages anymore. That's a fancy way of saying that. Like, legally now, your descendants, hey, y'all been raised up to be human. That's historical achievement. That's a great achievement. Okay. That's basically what that said. The republic, he goes on to say, the republic, the state, the nation, as Socrates reminded us, is the milieu in which we matriculate morally, politically, and develop into literal human beings. That's false, but let me continue this actual paragraph. He goes on to say, this is not a principle for extolling the rights of the state above the individual. It is a duty we each have to ourselves to secure the preconditions of a free, civilized republic that we need as human beings. Okay. So what he's saying is that the government known as the republic form of government is the means by people develop into actual human beings. That's not true. You are human by birth. According to what he said, this is God-given birthrights. He just stated earlier that it was God-given birthrights in the article, but now it's no longer God-given birthrights. It's something that is established to you by way of a government. That's not true. The government is established as a result of the human state or the state of humanity. Meaning this, if you're a humane person, right, the type of government you set up will be reflective of your state, of your humane state. If you are a narcissist and you have the ability to create a government, more than likely you may have a dictatorship or something of that nature. The government is reflective of the mindset and the condition of the people. It is not the other way around, right? And if we're going to get in that, Socrates, again, the Greek Socrates, what he won't say is that he got his information from ancient Egypt. These guys, Socrates and the likes, Aristotle and the likes, they got their information from the ancient Egyptian mystery system. So if you're going to quote that, then you might as well really go to the source. But I digress. So he goes on. He says the United States often has functioned like a great eugenics program in the moral and political sphere. It has allowed people to reverse the accidents of birth that would have kept them enslaved in lower forms of life into an advanced realm of consciousness that now sees them existing as co-equals to their compatriots. This viewpoint is predicated on the fact that not all cultures are equal and not all forms of life establish optimal conditions for human flourishing. This viewpoint is controversial in that it holds that while all forms of enslavement are evil, enslavement that eventually improves the conditions of the enslaved is qualitatively less evil. We measure the contributions an action does in striving for a moral good against the harm it does in achieving the good. Hold up. So, let me stop. So, let me go ahead here. This is the most ridiculous and asinine rhetoric I have read as of late. So, you notice I'm feeling a way about it. This guy wrote this and it got published. See, not a lot of our people will read this. We don't peep what these intellectuals do. There's a lot of intellectuals, right, of all races who hate you. They despise you. They despise you. They see you as the scum of the earth. This article speaks to that mindset. Make no doubt about it. It's a holier than thou narrative. This guy actually said that the United States has often functioned like a great eugenics program. So basically, eugenics, There's I'm just going to say this real quick. Okay. There's something called Ma'afa 21. And you should actually, for all you who are listening to this, when you get a chance, go on YouTube and type up Ma'afa 21. That's MAAFA 21, the number 21. And you will, and this is all documented facts that they're given, and you are going to actually see firsthand what eugenics is. You're going to get into the whole history of eugenics, Planned Parenthood, and what they're doing right now. So he's actually praising the United States for acting like a great eugenics program. Okay. So he's saying it reversed the accidents of birth. So these births are accidents. So he's basically saying that the people who've been identified as Negro, Black, Colored, African American, they're basically accidents, right? They weren't supposed to happen. Okay. And so while lower forms of life that would have been enslaved in lower forms of life, so living in Africa, with those who were kidnapped, them living in Africa would have qualified them to be enslaved in a lower form of life. Okay. And now, because of slavery, they get to be co-equals with the Europeans. And he said it's predicated on the fact that not all cultures are equal and not all forms of life establishes optimal conditions for human flourishing. There's a problem in this. Who qualifies cultures as equal? Based on what standard? You catch what I'm saying? When he says equal, all of them are not the same, but he's saying equal as far as higher and above rank. This is the whole race thing. The race, this is what I've been saying from day one. The race classification system is the result of this type of mindset. This is how they really view you, as not human. Thus, they label you as Black and African American, Negro, colored, these things that delude to slavery, these things that don't connect you to a nation, to a history, to a culture. This is why it's all done in the first place. And then we argue Black Lives Matter and I'm proud to be Black and all that. That's what Black means in the moral and political sphere, as this guy says it. You catch what I'm saying? Like, that is the reality of it. So, and then he goes on to say that somehow slavery in the United States is less evil because there was contributions that did a moral good. What the moral good? What was the moral good? He basically equated you to an animal, taking you out of captivity, you out of your environment and giving you a home that, now you get to eat with the massa. Now you get to, you get to be around white folk, the good white folk, so to speak. And, we give you, look, we put clothes on you, all the rags, but you clothed, you're fed, you should be grateful. This is what this Jamaican American professor of mixed race says. Okay. So I'm going to actually read the last two paragraphs. Okay. This is what it says. In this regard, in conclusion, he says, in this regard, African Americans have one ancestral home, the United States, to which they owe their allegiance. No one today who identifies as African American bears a resemblance to indigenous African ancestors who lived centuries ago. They differ in matters not of degree, but of kind. Once one has entered the historical process, those whom one has left behind are merely symbolic reminders of what one could have been and remained indefinitely. The road to inclusion in the human community was messy, But the forward-looking intention of America's founding principles was clear. None ought ever to be locked outside the historical process. Like all Americans, it is to these foundational principles, which were themselves the foundations of Black freedom, that African Americans owe their lives and fealty. He's basically saying, in conclusion, that what should I say? That basically, one, Negroes, Africa is not your home. United States is your home. You owe allegiance to the home, right? And none of you who identify as American, you don't bear any resemblance to any indigenous ancestors that you have who lived centuries ago. Okay? Because what they're saying is that now they weren't part of history. You're part of history now. You're part of the human community. You got included amongst us. You're human now. Okay? And this was based on the founding principles that, you shouldn't be locked out of the process. But we had to make you slaves first. Did this man forget that there was a civil war that spoke about this whole thing, that the whole United States erupted in a civil war, and that there was a secession from the Union, where the Confederacy seceded from the Union because they wanted to keep slaves? But now it's part of the process. This guy is the most ignorant. And so because of that, now if no one knew history and they read this, they would think that the United States started out and say, look, that these Europeans, because they weren't Americans, they were Europeans, they were immigrants themselves. These Europeans created this government and they said, look, you know what? We got these savages over here in Africa. They're locked out of history. They're not doing nothing. Let's take them, bring them over here, enslave them, civilize them, give them Christianity, and then at a certain point in time, we're going to emancipate them. It didn't happen like that. It didn't happen like that. The Civil War is proof of this. Dred Scott decision is proof of this. There's too many historical facts and too many facts in laws that were passed that speak against this narrative. This guy knows nothing, or maybe he does, but he writes as if he knows nothing about the history of slavery in the United States. Okay? Yet he is acclaimed as being specializing in ethics, social, and political philosophy, American foreign policy, and American politics. Okay? Come on, man. This is ridiculous. But I'm going to actually at this point in time take a brief pause for the cause. But when we get back, we will continue our discussion. You are tuned into WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. Don't go anywhere because we will be right back.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi everyone, be sure to connect with us on Facebook at WDRB Media and follow us on Instagram at WDRBmedia.radio
for double the information and inspiration.
The voice of the community. Voice of the community.
Welcome back to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, and those streaming live through free TuneIn radio app and through iHeartRadio. You are listening to What is Your Nationality? And I'm your host, Shem L. I am the author of several books, including What is the Devil Sometimes Called, which you can purchase on my website, shemel.com. That's SHEM-EL.com. gmail.com. Also on my website, you get the chance to join in on the 6-month mentorship known as Trauma to Triumph Training, where we deal with generational trauma, racial trauma, and post-traumatic slave syndrome. And so we can tackle those issues. We tackle those issues so we can get back to the state of the glorious people who we are. Now, just getting into the show, if you just tuning in, we were discussing the topic. The title of the show is called Who Understands the African American, Part 2. And this is a second part to the breakdown of the article written by Jason D. Hill, who is a Jamaican American professor and author. He is a professor of philosophy in DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois. So, if you're just joining us, I had concluded the article that was written by Jason D. Hill. That article is entitled, What Do Africans Owe America? A recent article that he put out. So, and basically, if you hadn't heard it before and you're just tuning in, I just would advise you to please go back, check the first. Just look up the article, What Do African Americans Owe America? And you will see how ridiculous this is. I'm just going to be honest, it is ridiculous. But going further and moving forward, I want to kind of just dive in a little bit more on this guy and kind of break down his mindset, because it is really amazing. It is amazing. So maybe I'm giving this guy too much advertisement, but I feel that it's necessary that we kind of dissect the mentalities of certain people here. This guy authored a lot of books. Okay. One of the books I mentioned was What Do White Americans Owe Black People? Racial Justice in the Age of Post-Oppression. The other one he wrote was We Have Overcome, an Immigrant's Letter to the American People, and which was basically his response to the book written by the brother Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me. Ta-Nehisi Coates is an American author and journalist. This brother here has been an advocate of reparations for those who are identified as African Americans. He's been a long-time advocate, and you can definitely tell that Jason D. Hill is not. He is absolutely not. So it is very interesting. One of the things that he argues is that the United States, the left, which he calls, because he identifies himself as a conservative Democrat and a conservative independent, supposedly. He says that the left, when you say the left, he calls that the liberals, right? But yet he is anti-liberal, but yet in his article, he speaks of what he termed to be liberal enlightenment, but he's conservative though. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But the point is that he says that the left promotes victimization of people of color and immigrants, telling them that quote, they are inconvertibly oppressed by whites, that there is a new form of oppression since Donald Trump became president, unquote. So at one point, he says that he's not a victim, but then he doesn't consider himself a victim, but then argues that liberals in this country promote victimization. Okay. Then he says that it's not, and I'm reading from the Wikipedia article, by the way. He argues that it's not resurgent racism that has emerged after Trump's election, but rather, quote, moral hysteria and hyperbole on the part of the far left that wants to paint racial minorities as helplessly under the yoke of white oppression. Obviously, this guy hasn't seen Trump supporters, but that goes besides the point. Anyway, so he has a number of books. I'll just go over some of them, and I think I mentioned one about the one that says Jamaica Boy in Search of America, which deals with his sexuality, being a homosexual. It's fiction, but it is kind of likened to the book that James Baldwin wrote, speaking of homosexuality, where it kind of, he kind of uses that as it's inspired by that author's life. So among the other books he has is, let me see. Okay. Civil Disobedience and the Politics of Identity, and Beyond Blood Identities. Okay. And the one that really got me, he has other books, but the one that really got me was the book called Beyond Blood Identities, Post-Humanity in the 21st Century. Okay. So this particular book, if you ever look it up in the description of it, it will say the following. Beyond Blood Identities uncover the social psychology of those who hold strong blood identities. In this highly original work, Jason D. Hill argues that strong racial, ethnic, and national identities, which he refers to as quote unquote tribal identities, function according to a separatist logic that does irreparable damage to our moral lives. Drawing on scholarship in philosophy, sociology, and cultural anthropology, Hill contends that strong tribalism is a form of pathology. Beyond Blood Identity shows how a particular understanding of culture could lead to a new theoretical approach to enriched human living. Hill develops a new version of cosmopolitanism that he calls post-human cosmopolitanism. Let me get that right. Cosmopolitanism, to solve a number of challenges in contemporary society, from the problem of defining culture, the failure of multiculturalism, the question of who owns native culture, the identification of Jews as a post-human people, and the problem of their status as chosen people in a modern world. The author applies cosmopolitan analysis to some of the major problems in our global and interdependent world. He posits a world in which community has been dispensed with, and replaced by a successor term, sociality. The broad, unmarked space in which creative social intercourse takes place. Hill applies a new cosmopolitanism to ideate the new post-humanity for the 21st century. Now, this is very interesting, and the reason why this is so interesting is because he's basically anti-nationality. Not only is he anti-race, he's anti-nationality. So, which, of course, doesn't fly right with me, but that's besides the point. Here's something you have to understand. As I mentioned before, in the previous episode, when I went and talked about him, this man is identified as mixed race. Which means he more than likely is mixed with some European blood and some blood that you may refer to as African blood or what have you, right? He's a melanated man, but he is mixed in heritage, and he calls himself mixed race, right? Now, someone like that is just a fact that is very common, and we have many cases to show this, of many people of race, of mixed race, biracial, what have you, mixed race, who are strongly opposed to the idea of nationality identification and racial identification, because they themselves do not have a specific one clear identification in those contexts. So they are naturally opposed to it, because they feel to identify one would be to disrespect the other. Okay. Now, that said, everybody don't fall under that line. Culturalism is very key in the development of society. You wouldn't go to a Chinese restaurant, and I'm just using this as the example. You wouldn't go to a Chinese restaurant and say, you know what, y'all should stop making Chinese food because that's separatist. That's not moral to have Chinese food and to make these things and give these Chinese names. We're all human. You would be looked at as a pure idiot. This guy, I'm sure this guy will go to a Jamaican restaurant, a Chinese restaurant, Italian restaurant, all these nationalities. Culture is developed by groups of people who share things in common. It's never developed by groups of people who don't share things in common. Though groups of people who don't share necessarily things in common can interact with each other and share things of culture, but they don't develop the culture. They get to understand each other's culture. So what he's saying is really ridiculous at the end of the day. And it's mind-blowing that this guy has this mindset. But then again, it's not, because again, he's of mixed race. He says the identification of Jews as a post-human people and the problem of their status as the chosen people in the modern world. I doubt very seriously that the Jewish people will ever give up their nationality and their identity. It has been the thing that has helped empower them. It has not been the idea we're all human. That has not been the thing. And someone like Jason D. Hill is totally oblivious to that fact because he doesn't comprehend nationality. He doesn't even know history based on his article. But these new ideas he wants to introduce is not reality. It's not based in reality. But of course, he pushes an agenda, and his main target is the people who have been actually been, I would say, disenfranchised the most. People who have been identified as Negro, Black, colored, African American, etc. So it's obviously that there are individuals out here who push this anti-cultural, right, under anti-cultural narrative under the pretense of we're creating a new culture. We're being inclusive, this, DEI thing and what have you. And it's really under that guise, and it really is a means to actually keep those who've been oppressed historically continue to be oppressed, because the ancient hatreds of racism and white supremacy still exist. Who is he telling this to? You feel what I'm saying? So yeah, we got to be mindful of this. And again, I know most of the people who are listening to this show probably never don't check in for this guy. But as I mentioned before, there are many people in academia who hold strong feelings against the common people, who are going through these struggles, and they despise you. They may not say it, but their articles, their statements, their literature, their broadcasts, whatever they do in the media, it just speaks to that. So we definitely have to be mindful. But what I will do, we will have a conclusion. I'm going to take a brief pause for the cause, and we'll get back with the discussion after the break. You're tuned into WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. Don't go anywhere, because we'll be right back.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi everyone, be sure to connect with us on Facebook at WDRB Media and follow us on Instagram at WDRBmedia.radio
for double the information and inspiration.
The voice of the community. Voice of the community.
Welcome back to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, and those streaming live through free TuneIn radio app and through iHeartRadio. You are listening to What is Your Nationality? And I'm your host, Shem L. I'm the author of several books, including How Many Days Are in the Circle, which you can purchase on my website, sheml.com. That's SHEM-EL.com. And also on the show, you get the opportunity to enroll in the 6-month mentorship program known as Trauma to Triumph Training, where we deal with racial trauma, generational trauma, and post-traumatic slave syndrome to tackle these issues and get back to the state of the glorious people who we are. Now, just in conclusion, if you're just tuning in, we have been discussing the issue, I should say the episode that is entitled Who Understands the African American Part 2, where we have been breaking down the works, particularly the recent article by Jason D. Hill, who is a Jamaican American professor and author. He's a professor of philosophy in DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois. And he wrote an article called What Do African Americans Owe America? And he's written other works as well. And we were going into, in this past segment, this particular book that he wrote called Beyond Blood Identities, where he actually just basically outright speaks against nationality. It's totally anti-nationality. And that kind of speaks to the fact of his own background and his own situation of being of mixed race and not identifying with any one particular nationality or race, thus he has that that position. He has that he comes with that